session for Small Business Week, and it will be available for viewing afterwards. And so before we begin, I wanted to provide an overview of this webinar etiquette. All attendees will be muted. To ask your questions verbally during the Q&A portion of the presentation, please raise your hand and we will unmute you. During the presentation or at the time of the Q&A sessions, please submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and you do have the option to submit the question anonymously. You can use the chat button to communicate with us privately or to all attendees. The presentation slides will be provided via email to all attendees after the presentation, and this meeting will be recorded, like I said, and provided by the Economic Development Department. And lastly, we would love to receive your thoughts and feedback on this presentation. So once this presentation ends, a short survey will pop up on your screen if you would like to submit it. Now we can go ahead and get started. Again, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today as we discuss what to know before you buy or lease a property as it relates to development permitting and requirements. This session is presented by the Development Process Team with the Development Services Department. My name is Natalia Rodriguez, and joining me today is the rest of the Development Process Team, Sandra Castillo and Cole Hubbard. The topics today include providing an overall breakdown of how to determine what can be built on the property. So I will provide information on jurisdiction, zoning, land use and site development regulations, combining districts and overlays, and building use. Then I will discuss overall and specific tips before buying or leasing a property and provide information on the difference between buying or leasing a property that has an existing structure versus on undeveloped land. I will then demo two City of Austin interactive development tools, which are Property Profile and Austin Building Connect. And if you have an address that you're interested in purchasing or leasing and would like for me to use it during this part of the presentation, please submit it in the chat button. And I will wrap up the presentation by providing helpful links and resources and letting you know what our team can support you or how our team can support you during the permitting and development process. So the first thing to determine before operating a structure or business is to determine if development permits are required from the City of Austin's Development Services Department, which is our department. The first step in this process is to determine the jurisdiction of the property. For properties located within the full purpose or limited purpose jurisdiction, full City of Austin requirements and regulations have to be met. For properties located within the 2 or 5 mile extraterritorial jurisdiction or the ETJ, some city requirements and regulations may be required, but the majority of the requirements will come from the county. And in both of these instances, you will need to obtain development permits from the City of Austin and possibly the county if the property is in the ETJ. If the property is not located in any of these jurisdictions, for example, it's in the Pflugerville ETJ, then most development permits would not be required from the City of Austin. Permits would only be required if you receive, or if the property receives utilities from the City of Austin, including Austin Energy and Austin Water. So once you determine the jurisdiction, the next step is to determine if zoning is applicable. The City of Austin has adopted zoning requirements and regulations for all properties within full purpose and limited purpose jurisdiction. These zoning requirements and regulations establish the land use and development standards on a property or piece of land. So for example, if you want to open a daycare facility, you will need to ensure that the existing zoning allows for a daycare use. Otherwise, the property zoning will need to be changed in order to allow for that use. Properties located in the City of Austin's 2 mile or 5 mile extraterritorial jurisdiction or ETJ do not have to comply with zoning requirements and regulations. However, these properties would need to comply with any requirements or regulations set forth by the recorded plat. So for example, if you're looking at a property and there is a recorded plat on the property, there might be additional restrictions for specific uses or square footages or things like that. So there might be a restriction that prohibits residential uses, meaning it would say residential uses are prohibited on this property. So it's important to determine the property zoning and determine if there is a recorded plat that would have any additional restrictions for development. So once you determine if zoning is applicable, you can confirm the base zoning district and determine if your desired land use is permitted. The base zoning district is the first set of letters you will see in the zoning string. So in this zoning string example of CS, MU, CO, and P, The CS is the base zoning district, which means general commercial services. And as you can see in the image, in the top pink area of the image, those are some of the base zoning districts that the city of Austin has. And so each one of these districts designates the allowed land uses and site development regulations for the property. So for example, if you want to do a hair salon, which is personal services, all of these that you see here with the dashed line, those are not permitted. That's not a permitted use in that base zoning district. So when you're looking at personal services, you would need to go across and figure out, what your base zoning district is and whether or not that land use is permitted. If you see a C in that base zoning district designation for that land use, that means it's a conditional use permit would be required, which means it would add an additional application and fees, and that particular land use has to get approved by Land Use Commission. If you see a P under the base zoning district, then that land use is a permitted use within that base zoning district, meaning that zoning or proposed land use can be administratively approved by staff. And so site development regulations are the basic standards for the associated base zoning district. They dictate maximum pervious cover, maximum building coverage, floor to area ratio, minimum setbacks, maximum height, and various other things that you can see in this image. And so if I wanted to do a hair salon and my base zoning district is CS, these would be all of these site development regulations that would be applicable to my property. So my minimum lot size would be 5,750 square feet. My minimum lot width is 50 feet. The maximum height of the structure is 60 feet. And the list goes on with setbacks and other restrictions or other site development regulations, I should say. And so the permitted land uses and site development regulations are the basic requirements associated with the base zoning district. So once you determine the allowed uses and regulations for the property's base zoning district, you want to determine if there are any combining districts and overlays on the property. These combining districts and overlays are special districts that, when combined with the base zoning district, may alter permitted site development characteristics and uses on the site. These districts and overlays are indicated after the base zoning district. So in this sample zoning string, if the property has a zoning district of CS, MU, NP, CO, the MU is mixed use, the CO is conditional overlay, not to be confused with certificate of occupancy, and the NP is neighborhood plan. And these are all special districts that will alter the CS base zoning district requirement. And these are some examples of the combining districts and overlays. And to give you an idea of what I mean when we say it may alter the base zoning district, let's look at the Capitol View Corridor district, which you can see a portion of that in this image. So let's say you're looking at a property and there are the letters CVC after the base zoning district. So you know that the Capitol View Corridor combining district would be applicable to that property. And so if your property is CS zoning, the maximum height, like I mentioned in the previous slide, is 60 feet. But if you look at this Capitol View Corridor district, in that particular location, it might say that the maximum height is 40 feet. And so instead of being able to develop up to 60 feet, which is allowed in your base zoning district, you would actually have to comply with the combining district overlay of the CVC, which is 40 feet. So this is just an example of how additional restrictions may impact the base zoning district and that you'll need to look at before purchasing or leasing a property. So if you're looking at a property that has an existing building, then you will want to start by looking at the approved building use for the structure. And this will be located on the most recent certificate of occupancy. A certificate of occupancy is a document provided by the city that proves that the structure is habitable and ready to be occupied based on the property complying with legal use and the property type, and it has met all housing and building code requirements. If the certificate does not exist for a structure, then this will need to be obtained by submitting development applications to our department. This certificate, which is signed, sealed, and certified by the building official at that time, will need to be correct and up to date in order to occupy the structure. So when you're looking at the certificate of occupancy, you want to first look at the building address. And the building address will indicate a unit number, suite number, things like that. So if you're looking at a unit within, a big building, you want to make sure that the address is exactly what you are looking at. So there could be numerous amounts of units or suites on a particular address. So you want to make sure that that's exact. Additionally, you want to look at the proposed occupancy and like what the description says, along with the building group and division. And so the proposed occupancy typically is a description. And in this case, it does say it's a construction of an amenity center, including restaurants and restrooms and a pool. But the building group and division is specifically as A3, assembly, worship, and recreation. So when you are looking at an existing certificate of occupancy, you want to make sure that your land use and your building use match up with what it says on this certificate of occupancy. If it is different, or if you have questions about it, or you're unsure about what any of this means, please contact our department and confirm and make sure that what you're looking at for the certificate of occupancy does meet exactly what you're wanting to propose. And if you would like more information about the overall development process for obtaining permits and receiving your certificate of occupancy, our team presented yesterday on this subject titled Commercial Development Process from Start to Finish, which was recorded. So please reach out to us if you do not receive this link from the Economic Development Department, and we'd be more than happy to share that with you. So when you're looking to buy or lease a property, you want to assume that permits are required for anything you want to do, especially for commercial projects. If the current owner is not aware that permits are required and constructs something or operates their structure in a way that's not allowed or permitted, this could lead to a code violation and potentially legal action if it is not addressed. The current owner of any property is responsible for permitting all improvements, including unpermitted work performed by previous owners. And if you are looking to lease a property, then know that any submitted applications and proposed improvements require owner's authorizations. So they will need to be included in the application process. To determine what permits will be needed before occupying the property, specifically for an existing structure, you want to request the current certificate of occupancy from the owner, or you can request it from our department. You want to double check that the land use and building use accurately reflect what you're wanting to do, like I mentioned in the previous slide. And if it does not, then you will know that at a minimum, a change of use application would be required. And so you want to make sure that you understand the permitting and development requirements to operate and occupy the property and structure. For example, if you have a permit, if a permit is required for a change of use, so let's say you do look at that certificate of occupancy and it's not what you're wanting to do, and it's allowed per your zoning and it's a permitted land use, that particular application could take maybe a minimum of 2 to 3 months to obtain a new certificate of occupancy. And that's if everything is approved the first time, which typically is not the case. So if you understand the development process, then you will have a better understanding of the minimum fees and timelines to occupy the structure and property, and that will help you determine if you're willing to buy or lease that property. And some things to look for to understand the permitting requirements for that specific property that you're looking at includes looking for common red flags and researching the property's existing conditions. So some common red flags that will require development applications and permits from our department before operating the structure or property include a lack of certificate of occupancy for current land and building use. This can be determined, like I previously mentioned, by asking for the certificate of occupancy from the owner or from our department, and we can also let you know if a certificate of occupancy does not exist. You also want to look for expired permits, which can be found doing the permit history search on the Austin Building Connect website. We have had many owners, especially new residential homeowners, that purchased the property and did not know that there were expired permits on the property. So as the new owner, you would be responsible for addressing the expired permits, typically before any new work is approved. You also want to look for active code violations. If you see an active code violation when doing the permit history search using the Austin Building Connect tool, then you'll want those to be closed before purchasing or leasing the property. This could delay any new applications with the city, so you want to make sure that that's not active. If you do find any permits, or if you do not find any permits for an existing structure, or if you see brand new construction when searching or when looking at the property, you want to verify that that was actually constructed, and you can find that doing the permit history. And this will be a big red flag to you, because then you know as the new owner that you would have to permit it. And so we typically see lack of permits for wooden decks, fences, and some small structures like sheds. So if you see anything on the property, or just really all the buildings or structures on the property, and also if you see something that's like bright, new, and shiny, like you want to look at the permit history and see if that was actually permitted with the city. And also, if the property is notably less expensive in the surrounding area, this is a really big flag. This red flag might indicate that when permits are requested from the city, the permitting process will be expensive and a lengthy process. Our team assisted an owner that purchased a cheaper property, and they ended up having to go through the entire development process and had many development regulations that they needed to comply with, including heritage tree and floodplain regulations. So they ended up having to redesign their entire site, their building layout. They needed several variances and waivers, and the project ended up taking over, I think, 1.5 to 2 years to actually get through the permitting process. And so it definitely went over their projected timeline and allocated funds for the project. And so, you know, we've had many other small business owners that have run into this, or even residential homeowners that have run into this issue. And some of them have told us that if they knew everything it took to develop on that specific property, even though the price was great for that, you know, undeveloped land, then they definitely would have walked away and not purchased it. So if you see a price that is too good to be true, ask yourself, why is it less expensive? And know that the development requirements and regulations might make the project very expensive and increase the time before you can occupy the structure. And so these common red flags will increase the timeline before the property can be occupied and will generate fees for the applications and permits. So it's important to look for these red flags for a property if you're looking to buy or lease. So when looking for red flags, you also want to research the property for existing conditions. You want to determine the current zoning and permitted land uses. If you don't have the proper zoning for your use and your use is prohibited, then you will need to rezone the property, which would have to be approved by City Council. You want to determine also if the property is a legal lot or tract. If it does not have a recorded plat or what's called a land status determination, an application will have to be submitted and approved through our department. If there is an existing building, you want to determine the current building use by looking at the certificate of occupancy. I keep bringing this up because the certificate of occupancy is very important when looking at an existing building. You want to look for any major development regulations which could increase the amount of requirements to develop the property, such as heritage trees, floodplain regulations, if it's a historic property, things like that, because that can definitely increase any time or costs associated with development. If the if the land use and building use exist, you want to verify the existing permitted parking and required parking for the site. For example, if you are looking to purchase a property or that has an existing building, and that building is about 1,000 square feet and it was used for general retail, and you want to open up a coffee shop or bakery with a little seating area. So a coffee shop bakery with seating area would be considered a restaurant. So when you're looking at a general retail store, that particular land use requires less parking per square footage than a restaurant. So if you're looking at this particular building that's 1,000 square feet, based on the current parking requirements, 4 parking spaces would be required for that general retail store. However, if you want to build a restaurant right there or change it into a restaurant, then 10 parking spaces would be required. And so you would need to figure out whether or not the 6 additional required parking spaces can actually fit on the property. So that means looking at the impervious cover to see if you can expand your asphalt or concrete on the property. Does the parking lot need to be redesigned to make sure that there's sufficient maneuverability for the parking? Do you need additional accessibility parking spaces? So these are definitely things that you want to look at when you are looking at an existing property. We've had several small business owners that did not realize that parking would be such a big issue for their site, especially since their site was a little smaller than what their allocated parking would allow for. And so sometimes they do have to, they've either requested a variance, which is another cost and added time to the project. And in some instances, they've ended up having to pick a different location because they couldn't fit all the required parking on the site. So it's really important to verify the parking. And as I mentioned before, you will want to research the property to determine if there are any expired permits, active code violations, and unpermitted work. And overall, if you have any questions about any of these tips or what can be built on a property, please contact our department. It is better to talk with staff and to hear about these regulations and requirements, what you can and cannot do on any property you're looking at before buying or leasing that property. And so when looking at a property that has an existing structure, or if it's undeveloped land, there's some general information that you should be aware of. Typically for an existing structure, you can leave the floor plan as is and do an interior remodel or do a change of use, or you can build an addition to the structure or completely do a new structure altogether on that undeveloped land. So some differences, the costs are typically lower if you're going to do an interior remodel or change of use. And this is specifically for the permitting fees and also construction fees in general, versus if you're doing new construction or constructing on undeveloped land. These properties or these permits can be a little bit higher or more higher than, or significantly higher than an existing structure, and as well as construction costs. Additionally, for an existing structure, there is less flexibility on the desired layout and proposed improvements. This typically happens, like let's say if the existing building is maxed out on building coverage. So if you wanted to do an addition, you might not be able to do that, or you'd have to demo a portion of the building to make sure you still comply with the site development regulations. Versus undeveloped land, there's typically more flexibility on the desired layout and the proposed improvements. However, this too would be subject to the site development regulations. So like I mentioned on the previous case, if you have a site that has floodplain regulations and heritage trees, you might have to design the building and parking and all of that stuff around those existing features. So just know that there is more flexibility generally with undeveloped land. For an existing structure, overall the process can be shorter. Like I mentioned, if you're doing a change of use, we've seen projects go through 2 to 3 months at a bare minimum. On average, it's about 6 months, 6 or 7 months. But for undeveloped land, this could be 2 times as long, or even a couple of years, depending on exactly what you're wanting to do. And the big thing with existing structures is it has a higher potential of red flags. So those red flags I mentioned might be the lack of certificate of occupancy. There could be expired permits or work that wasn't permitted. And so if there's an existing structure, there's a higher potential of these red flags. And so you definitely want to do your due diligence before purchasing that property. And so I'll go ahead and take a moment for any questions. Like I mentioned, you can submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, or you can raise your hand and we will unmute you.
It doesn't look like we have any questions at this time, Natalia.
Okay, thanks, Sandra. Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and continue. And don't forget, please feel free to ask your questions throughout the entire presentation. And so now we'll go into the interactive tools. I'll provide a basic overview of how to search for the address and how to show information. We are including the link to property profile in the chat if you do want to follow along. And I don't think I saw any addresses that you wanted us to demo, so I'll go ahead and pick one. So this is what property profile looks like. When it pops up, you want to click on the address at the very top, the address button, and then you'll see this here. This right here, this address search tips is a really great link to provide some other information on how to search for an address using our interactive tools. Sometimes it can be real picky on how you enter an address, but you'll go ahead and start typing your address here. One thing to note for property profile is the address will start populating as long as the address has been approved by 911 addressing. So if you're looking at any given address and you start typing it in, it should automatically populate, and you want to click on that one. If you enter the address and don't click on the addresses that populate, sometimes it won't pull up and it can kind of get a little weird. So just make sure that I always pick the one that populates, just for easier access of the tool. And so when you are looking at the property, automatically on the left, some basic information on the property will populate. You'll see the address, you'll see the jurisdiction, the zoning. And so these are two great things to look at to make sure, like once you start the development process, it gives you some great information. Additionally, there's the annexation history. It tells you what we have on file for the legal description. It does indicate buildings, units. There are a couple expired permits on this property, one from 1979 and one from 2016. So any expired permits will pop up, and then generally the permit history will pop up as well. So there's some basic information that you can look through on the left-hand side. And so in order to look at the additional development regulations that might be applicable to the property, we always tell our customers to that you need to open up the layers and turn on the layers, excuse me. So click on change visible map layers. And on the side, we typically tell people to click on residential review. So we know we're not looking at a residential review property. However, when you click on this one, a lot or the majority of all of the layers that you need to see will populate. So it'll automatically turn on for you. So you're not having to go through and click each one. The additional layers that we tell people to look at include so you go under environmental the environmental layers, open that up, scroll down a little bit to the bottom, and you'll see what's called a CEF setback, which is critical environmental feature. And you also, we also just tell people to have the tree canopy on as well, just so you can see what that looks like. And so once you have your layers on, then you can actually click on the identification tool to determine, what's on the property. And so you can either use the point function. I typically use the polygon. And so once I click on the polygon, you'll be able to actually draw exactly what you want the property profile to show you. So typically for commercial projects, I do start in the right of way because I do want to see what the transportation requirements are around the property. So I'll typically kind of go out here in the right of way, and I'm just doing a single click. So you do a single click to outline what you want. And when you're done with your outline, you double click. And once you do that, all of the layers that are under or that are shown for what you've identified will start populating here on the left. And so as you scroll through, you can see these are all of the different layers that were turned on that were associated with this particular property. So you can click on any one of them, hover over what's shown, and it'll tell you where that's at. So as you can see, this recorded subdivision is for the property I was looking at. This one is for the one next door. And so it does provide also some basic information. So this one does have a recorded subdivision here, and you can actually search for this subdivision to find the actual document itself and look for any of those restrictions that we talked about. Zoning cases as well. So you can see that that area is highlighted with the zoning case. So essentially when you're looking at a property, you want to go through all of these layers and see what's populating. And another example that I have here that I wanted to show you for floodplain is this is what it looks like when it populates FEMA floodplain. And when you click on it, or excuse me, when you hover over it, it'll show you that area. So if I zoom out a little bit and hover over it, you can see the general outline of where that floodplain is. And so those are the different layers that you want to see to determine whether or not there's any other regulations that you're going to have to comply with on the property. And so just also letting you know, when you're looking at the side here, if it doesn't say recorded subdivision or it doesn't say site plan review cases, this does not mean that there's not a recorded, or excuse me, there does not mean that there's not a site plan application or land status determination on the property. Unfortunately, those particular applications are not shown in property profile. However, you can search for them in the permit history tool with ABC Connect, which I'll show you shortly. And so additionally, there's this help tool at the very top. So if you have any questions about this particular tool, you can look at training videos and any other information here. And so overall for a property profile, once you look at the layers for the property and have a basic understanding of what is present on the property, please contact our staff to ensure you understand the requirements and regulations for that property. And now we can go into the interactive tool for Austin Building Connect. And so for this tool, unlike property profile, the address will not automatically populate. Because it does need to be exact, I try to put in just the basic address. So I don't include unit or suite numbers or anything like that. Because if you don't enter it exactly, then it won't actually populate any of the applications for that particular address. And so we're going to look at 3400 East Howard Lane. And I have to go in and add the east. And so when you're looking at properties, you want to make sure that you backtrack the start date to 1900. That's typically the year we give people. We don't have permits from 1900, but by setting it back so far, it'll actually show all of the permit history on the property. Because sometimes we do have permits from like the 30s or 40s that if you indicated the start year of like 1970, it would not show up. And so when looking at this property, these are all of the different applications that have been submitted to our department for permits. So you want to look at the status of the application. You want to look at the description, like what exactly are they doing? And then here's the permit case number. And so all of these are clickable links that when you click on it, it'll open something up, and I can show you that with this one. And so all of this information is what we approved for the application. So this is great to know building square footages, what was inspected, things like that, who actually, the people details are on there as well. And at the very bottom, if you are looking at a building permit and it was approved after August 9th of 2019, the system should update or attach the approved certificate of occupancy if one was issued. And so here you can see this building permit. There was one that issued, it was available, and I just opened it up. And so this is that certificate of occupancy for that property. So you do have the option of looking for this online as well. But if you can't find it, please contact our staff and we can provide assistance with that. And additionally, looking at some other folders, pull it up. We're going to go back to a new search. And 13125. And we're going to look at 13125 Pond Springs Road. And again, backdate your address to 1900. And so when you look at this address, you do see some CV folders, which is code violation. And so I wanted to show you this just so you know what it does look like. And when you look at the status, it does say closed. And so this is definitely what you want to see when you are looking for the permit history. And again, as you start going through permit history, there's multiple pages that you can go through, determine whether or not there's expired permits, what was permitted. You can find plans, certificate of occupancy, and essentially you can also know if work was unpermitted. So if you can't find the deck, the wooden deck that they did, or a covered patio or something like that, if you can't find it in here, then you know that that was never permitted. And so again, if you're looking at this information and you have any questions about anything, please contact our department and we can let you know exactly what we're seeing and what you'll need to do for the requirements. And so here's some helpful links and for helpful links and resources. These are some frequently used folder codes and descriptions for Austin Building Connect. When you're searching through the permit history, like I just showed you, these are some of the abbreviations you will see for the properties or for the folder. So you'll know which folder you're looking at. And so you'll see that we saw the BP, which is building permit, CV is code violation. So as you're going through the permit history and you're trying to figure out what permits were done, this is a great cheat sheet for you to look at. And so here we have some helpful links and resources that we find helpful for searching for information, including the interactive guides. And so some of this stuff is what I discussed and showed you. A lot of the other links are just helpful information as you start going through the development process and determining what you can build on the property. And so I will say the majority of everything that I can discuss or that I discussed can be used for both commercial and residential properties. So if you are interested in purchasing an existing home or property, then I would recommend for you to research the property like I discussed and verify what can and cannot be built. For example, we do have homeowners who purchase a residential home with the hopes of building an accessory dwelling unit, only to find out afterwards that they don't have the appropriate zoning, that would not allow them to have a secondary unit, or there's unpermitted work on the property that they now have to permit before doing the ADU. So it's just really important to do your due diligence for any property that you're looking to purchase or lease within the City of Austin limits. So overall, I know this information and these steps sound overwhelming and complicated. And if you have to go through the development process with our department, it can definitely create a huge expense and increase your timelines of when you can occupy the structure or property. We hope that this information creates less complications for you and your business, but if you do need to go through the development process with our department, I want to reassure you that our team, the development process team, is here to help you. Our team provides optional support for homeowners and small business owners with navigating the entire development process from start to finish. We provide assistance through the review process, which is zoning review to building plan review, and through permitting the activations, or excuse me, activating the permits and going through the inspections process until you receive that certificate of occupancy. We provide a variety of services to homeowners and small business owners, which include being a single point of contact for you throughout the development process from start to finish. We provide written materials about each process to simplify the steps for your project, and we can connect you to the right resources every step of the way. Our team focuses on the process and the steps to move forward through the development process. So if you have technical questions, we will refer you to the appropriate technical staff for assistance. But again, feel free to reach out to us at any point in the development process and we can guide you. And as I mentioned, our team supports applicants who are residential homeowners and small business owners who are unfamiliar with the development process. They're going through the development process themselves, and they have submitted a limited number of development applications or none at all. Meaning this could be you as a small business owner, this could be your first application for a property, or if you're wanting to expand your business and this is the 4th or 5th location that you're looking at, each property is different, which means each process is different. So as long as you, the owner or leaser, are submitting the permit applications yourselves and going through this process for your own property, then please reach out to our team and ask for support. You can currently reach out to our team by email at developmentprocessteam@austintexas.gov or by phone at 512-974-1040. You can also find our contact information and other resources at our website listed here. And please remember that our team is here to help you, the owner, at any point in the process. You can be an existing applicant who is already going through the development process, or you can be a prospective applicant who's looking to purchase a property or submit an application for development and wants to know the process and overall information for their property. And so with that, I will open the floor up to questions. Like I mentioned previously, feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A button or raise your hand and we will unmute you.
We have a question. I have a naive question, but under what circumstances do you typically find unpermitted structures going up or contractors not disclosing the need for them?
Yeah, let me. A lot of the times we typically find unpermitted work because either the owner is unaware that a permit is required, or contractors are doing the permits without, or excuse me, are doing the work without permits. We have heard from customers, both small business owners or commercial customers and residential customers, that contractors might know that permits are required, but they don't obtain the permits because for whatever reason, they don't actually come through our department. So there's a variety of reasons why people don't obtain permits from our department. I will say our department, if you come to us and you just purchased a property and you see that there wasn't permitted work, we're not going to start flagging you and making you do things. We're not in the business of making you go through this process. However, if there is a code complaint, or typically a code complaint, that's when the code department will go out there and verify whether or not something did meet code and criteria. And then at that point, a code violation might be issued, which would then force you to come through our department to obtain permits. And hopefully that answered your question, but if you have any other questions about that, feel free to put it in the Q&A.
Another question from an anonymous attendee. Hi, you did an amazing job presenting this information, Natalia. May I ask what your role is in the process?
So like I mentioned, the development process team, our role is to be with you as a small business owner through every step of the way. So we're actually involved in every single process. If you come in and you're looking at a property and it's not zoned correctly, we will guide you through that process, tell you who to contact. We might set up meetings for you. We can have virtual meetings with you, talk you through the process. And then if you need a subdivision, we'll walk you through that process as well, help you assist you with talking, if you need to talk with staff. And so essentially, and this is what part of the presentation that we did yesterday was about, of walking you through every single step of the process from start to finish. And so our role as a team is to help guide you through that process and make sure that it's as streamlined and clear as possible for you to get that certificate of occupancy and essentially be done with your permits.
Another question for you. If we wanted to have an inspection, if we wanted to have an inspector look at our property, is there a fee? Where can I find the cost?
So in order to have an inspector look at the property, you do have to have a permit. The city of Austin, or at least our department, does not send out inspectors if there is not a permit. So you first have to go through that process of either obtaining a building permit, which would be through plan review, building plan review, either for commercial or residential. Once your permits are approved, then that's when you would activate the permit. If you're only doing a standalone permit, then you would actually obtain permits through the service center. And standalone are trade permits, so like mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So once that permit is activated, then if you're the applicant, you would have access to the inspections through the Austin Building Connect portal through your account. And then you would actually schedule an inspector to come out on any particular day to do the inspection. So if you have questions of, I purchased this building and want to know if this complies with code, our inspectors will not go out there and look at it, unfortunately. However, you can, ask, you're more than welcome to ask us questions. But in order to actually get someone out there, you do have to have an inspection. And our department does have a fee schedule for all of those permits. And so if you are looking at trying to request a permit, our team can help you with that, or any of the specific divisions that you're going through can actually tell you, like, based on what you're doing, this is the fee that you have to pay to go through our process. And just know that there are fees along the entire process. So it's not just one blanket fee that you have to pay and that's it. Once you go through plan review, there's a fee for that. Once you start activating your permits, there's a fee for every single permit that you're trying to activate. So just know that it will continue until essentially you're done with the inspections. And something else I wanted to add about what is our role in the process. Something else our team does is we are working on process improvements for the department. So not only are we helping customers with the process or guiding them through the process, but we do listen to what the issues are. And we really are trying to figure out ways to make it more streamlined for all customers that are going through our department. So there are various process improvements and resources and helpful links and guides that we are have been working on and will continue to work on to make the process as easy for our customers as possible.
I am not seeing any hands or any other questions at this point.
Well, so we do have some time. We have about 10 minutes. So I'll leave the question and answer box open. So Sandra, just interrupt me if you see a question. But if y'all want to, feel free to leave or hop off if you want. However, I can definitely demo a little bit more in the permits, Austin Building Connect, and to kind of show you exactly what to look for on some things, because I really did give you a basic overview. And so let's look at property profiles. So let's look at that property we were looking at on Airport, and you saw that there was that recorded plat there. So recorded subdivision. So once you figure out which one is applicable to your site, so it's this one, you can copy the case number. So I copied the case number. You can go to, I'll just open a new, ABC public search. And since this is a case number, you'll pop it in right here. So I'm going to paste that case number and hit submit. And so once you hit submit, it's great, it went through. Then you can open up the case number. And this is all the general information of that recorded plat. It looks like it was done in the 80s, and here are the attachments for that recorded plat. So you can download these attachments. And sometimes these old ones are a TIFF document. And so here is that recorded plat. So you can actually zoom in and it'll show you exactly what that recorded plat, like what those lots are associated with that recorded plat. It'll give you some additional restrictions here. So it talks about that sidewalks are required, off-street loading is required, access from Airport to lot 2 is restricted to a joint use access with lot 3. And so this is sometimes a big one. Owners don't realize that their access might be restricted to a particular street and that joint use access is required with an adjacent property. So that's always something to look for. So these are all the restrictions associated with these properties. And so sometimes it might just be like for lot 1, but you do want to read through everything to see what else is available for that lot. And this is just other basic information about the recorded plat, but typically the big things to look for are the actual layout of the property and any additional restrictions. So this is a good example of what you can find when you're looking through property profile. And so then I'll go ahead and look more at these cases. And so when you're looking through here, you do see a DA. So the DA is that either it's going to be a site plan exemption or land status determination. And so these are the two applications that are not shown on property profile. And so if you see a DA application, look for the description here. If there's not a description, then click on the link and see what's inside. So when you look at it, it does say it's a site plan determination exemption, and it's an approved exemption for an amnesty certificate of occupancy for a cocktail lounge use established prior to December 31st, 2010, when it was annexed. And so this is the general information for that particular use. and then you'll scroll down to the bottom and you'll see the approved exemption. And so this is what the exemptions typically look like. You do see the application here. You'll see a description about exactly what's being proposed. And then you should see any supplemental documents, any plans, things like that. So here, in order to get an amnesty certificate of occupancy, which essentially is stating that your land use and building use, or I guess specifically land use, since this is a site plan exemption, that this use was in operation and was in the same configuration before it was annexed. And so typically that's like you're trying to grandfather the property before it gets annexed. And so this is what that particular application would be for. And so this essentially is you trying to get a certificate of occupancy to operate your building. Because at the time when it was constructed, it was done in the county, and the county does not issue certificate of occupancies, or at least that's what we've been told by customers. And so in order to operate your structure in our jurisdiction, you do have to obtain a certificate of occupancy from the city of Austin. And so there are a variety of processes, again, like I mentioned, that you have to go through. But this is just one of those options, is doing an amnesty CO. So essentially, this particular case got approved for land use. And then once you do land use, you continue with the process, and you can actually find permit history for that as well. So we can actually scroll back to search results and see, oh, it's taking me way back. Where was that? And we can try to find the building permit for that. So kind of kicked me back. So we're gonna try this again. It was 13125. Spring Road. Great. So we found that development assessment site plan exemption for that Marshall's Tavern. And so this was actually done in 2017. And so typically after that, sometimes there's a building permit or other applications associated with it that you can kind of look through and find. There's multiple site plan exemptions for that. But let's click on a building permit just to see what's in here. So this one is an amnesty certificate of occupancy, and they are also replacing damaged sheetrock and tile in the bathroom for an existing retail food store, for a convenience store. And so all of this, again, is associated with that building permit. Unfortunately, since this was done in 2017, that building, that certificate of occupancy is not attached. So you would have to ask the city of Austin, our department specifically, for that certificate of occupancy. But additionally, you can click on this related folder. So anytime you see related folders, you click yes. And well, this one says null, but let me pick a different one. It'll actually pop up all of the related permits associated with that folder. So whenever you're looking at a plan review folder, this is an amnesty CO. You click yes. Oh, why does that still say null? Let's try a different property just to make sure that y'all know what I'm talking about. So when you click yes, you don't know what's happening, but there should be multiple, I apologize for that, but there should be multiple links that pop up that, that actually show all of the different associated permits and folders with that particular one. And so if it had worked correctly, it might just be my thing right now, but if it does work correctly, whenever you see a PR, if you click on a PR application, a building permit should pop up and any trade permits should pop up. So that kind of lets you categorize them all together. So you can kind of find the permit history for that particular permit that was submitted. And again, if y'all have any questions about this stuff, please pop it in the Q&A chat. And we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to leave some time to do the survey at the very end. And so I'll go ahead and let y'all know that if y'all have any follow-up questions, or if y'all want to do a consultation request with our team, if you're looking at purchasing a property or leasing a property and you want some basic information or like want to know what that process looks like, please contact our team and we can guide you to the correct staff and let you know how to go through that process. And so please email us at developmentprocessteam@austintexas.gov and we can set some time up with you to talk about it. Again, these presentation slides will be provided after the presentation via email to all attendees. The meeting, like I said, is recording, and so we'll provide that through Economic Development Department. And like I mentioned, the survey hopefully should pop up at the very end of the session when it ends. And so we'd love to get your feedback and thoughts on this presentation. And so thank you again so much for attending Small Business Week and for attending our session. Hopefully you're able to take away a lot of information that can help guide you through buying or leasing a property here with the City of Austin. And don't forget to register for future classes and events.